Alright, so I think my first story is definitely going to be one of the more weird and eventful ones from the early days. This was from when I was still innocent and thought the players did sensible things like you'd read in fantasy novels. Oh, how wrong I was. This was the first adventure, so of course things were a bit cliche. The first adventure after they got off their tutorial island, which was its own thing that I might tell a story as well. The party, which was sort of a group of generic adventurers, not generic, but more the sort of weird freak show of adventurers you get in most campaigns. There was a tiefling warlock, a second tiefling sorcerer, both of which had 20 charisma because they got very lucky and I got very unlucky. A dwarven cleric who won't really come into the story. I think maybe somebody else who I might be forgetting. And most importantly, a certain character who is kind of the crux of the story because they tend to do slightly unusual things. This was a character, a Dragonborn, I believe a red Dragonborn, if memory serves, a warrior by the name of Drogo Targaryen, because this player liked Game of Thrones, obviously, and this character continued to be not a thorn in my side exactly, but a source of constant amusement. The campaign drifted towards a plot line in which darkness was enveloping the land. Of course, my first campaign, it was going to be a blooming apocalypse. And the party had to retrieve 3 treasures of the elements. I wonder where I got that from. 1 light crystal, 1 green crystal, which is basically nature crystal, and 1 shadow crystal. The nature crystal they managed to get via going to the Feywild, which was an event in of itself, although probably not interesting enough to tell here. Effectively, they managed to, on the orders of a thieves guild they were working for, screw up some local diplomacy that was going on between the humans and the elves, with the help of an NPC. But that venture wasn't particularly interesting, and so they got the Crystal of Green, put it in their bag. I think at this point they had already retrieved the Crystal of Light. I can't actually remember where they got that from. But the last one is the one I remember, and the main element of this story. It was in the Underdark. Sorry, not the Underdark, the Shadowfell. Now, Shadowfell, in this setting, and I think in most settings as far as I know, was a dark reflection of the material plane. And of course, they went to the dark reflection of their home city, the city of Idar. And they discovered it was a horrible place full of necromancers and skeletons and dark magic, and they got there through a grave. It was all quite edgy and a bit goth. Quite fun, though, although I probably wouldn't do it the same way again. And the party, my plan, of course, because if you're a new DM, you quite often plan, you think you can try to work out what the players will do. Never works. The original plan was the party were going to go there, do some investigating, and find out why the crystal was. Now, at this point, I didn't know where the crystal was as a DM. I hadn't planned that much in advance. So the plan was they were going to be directed towards a large church, where I knew it was, but I didn't know what would be guarding it, by a necromancer, who would basically say, I will give you where this is, and I'll give you the key to the door if you do this for me. Now, what I didn't plan for was a certain Dragonborn by the name of Drogo. Drogo said, effectively, you're a necromancer, right? Why don't... I'm a strong warrior, I've got vigour and vim, and I'm a strong Dragonborn, so why don't I sell you my body? The party was silent for a moment, trying to work out exactly what he meant, but it quite quickly transpired that the meaning wasn't quite what you thought he was doing. The plan, effectively, was the Necromancer would get sole rights to the Dragonborn's corpse once he was dead. The Necromancer, helped by a quite good persuasion check by the sorcerer, I believe, or possibly the warlock, he was quite persuaded and said, yeah, sure, that sounds good, because I couldn't really find a more interesting way to resolve that. And so the party went in with the Drogo was marked with the Necromancer's mark, and the party went into the church. Some stuff happened in there. The Bard, who was the other party member, who I've just realised I've forgotten, sorry, Stephen the Bard, did some sneaking, managed to pull aside one of the Beholder, which is what was guarding the Shadow Crystal, one of his minions aside, trying to persuade him that they were starting a band, and then slit his throat. But to cut a long story short, I don't think the dungeon took that long. They fought the Beholder, they won quite handily, and they got the Shadow Crystal. At this point, we cut a little bit ahead. At this point, the party had discovered, kind of through hints and tips, that the thing causing the shadows to descend was a powerful shadow dragon called Ichenwanuex. Now, they didn't know this, but one of the party members, the sorcerer, was actually Ichenwanuex's long-lost relative, hence she was a draconic sorcerer. And so she kind of slowly lured them into his lair. And it was quite a successful luring. She managed to actually get the entire party imprisoned in Ichenwanuex's tower. They did manage to break out as big adventurers, but they broke out in his tower in the Shadowfell. And the player who betrayed the rest of the party got a new character, and everything went on as normal as they progressed up the tower. But the interesting thing, the important thing about this session, and the weirdness really starts to cut in here. As the party fight this huge shadow dragon on the roof of a Shadowfell tower, the party do quite well, apart from poor Drogo. Drogo, the Dragonborn, who, if you remember, had just sold his soul to a Necromancer. Well, his body. And had just then been ripped apart by a shadow dragon. Now, if anyone who's listening to this is a DM, you might know that shadow dragons have a special ability. That special ability is, if my memory serves, they breathe, their breath weapons can cause things to raise as zombies. Now, Drogo rose as a zombie, but as a zombie under control of the Necromancer, whose power he had gained, and leaving his spirit in a kind of a weird situation, hanging around the party. And once the dragon was slain, along with the now zombified Drogo stuck around and started tormenting the party. He haunted the warlock and persuaded the warlock to eat his previous corpse's heart, for reasons that still elude me to this day. But the thing that really strikes into my mind is something that happened a little while after. Now, at this point, the player had left, or not left, but wasn't there for a while. And the warlock, who was, in character quite sad about Drogo dying and being raised as a zombie, decided, nice gesture, I'm going to rename my horse. I'm going to name my horse Drogo. And, the party went, oh, that's quite nice, yeah. But then, when Drogo, not knowing the horse's name, possessed the horse named Drogo, things got a little more complicated. And so the party was then forevermore followed by a horse named Drogo, possessed by a spirit, also named Drogo. Sadly, that campaign ended a few months later after a slightly more successful arc about a whole plague of oozes. And Drogo, the last time we saw Drogo was breaking out of a small set of stables, along with the rest of the party's horses, and went running across the landscape into the sunset. And I like to think that even after all the horrible apocalypses that I've put on my very first setting, all the terrors that have been there, somewhere wandering the fields is still a half dragonborn horse named Drogo, and probably quite a large harem of very confused horses.